Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us.
Mirna Zagar has devoted her professional career to the field of contemporary dance, dedicated to creation, production, development of artistic projects and dance infrastructure, supporting artistic careers, engaging in development of opportunities for international collaboration, and those that aim to lift dance as an art form integral to society's well-being. For over 40 years, she has contributed to the development of contemporary dance in Croatia and the broader region as founding artistic director of Dance Week Festival in Zagreb, celebrating the 40th anniversary in 2023, founder of the Croatian Institute for Movement and Dance, which is a non-profit organisation, and initiator of Croatia's first purpose-built facility for dance, now known as Zagreb Dance Centre. Mirna has been involved as both partner and project leader in 18 European Union projects and has a breadth of experience in mentoring emergent leaders in dance. She frequently is asked to serve as juror for international dance competitions or projects and consults on dance developments internationally. Mirna has been awarded by the Governor-General of Canada for the Silver Medal for contribution to cultural cooperation between Canada and Croatia. And as the Executive Director of the Dance Centre in Vancouver, Canada, British Columbia's primary resource centre, she was charged to facilitate the development of a dance house and develop programmes to pivot Vancouver dance international and international focus. In 2001, Scotiabank Dance Centre opened its doors, becoming Canada's first purpose-built facility. And we have the pleasure of talking with Mirna today about all of its history and its future. The Dance Centre today is a leading force in Canadian dance and an international presence. The most recent accomplishment is the requisition of the land that the Dance Centre is built on. Mirna's work is informed by over 40 years of working internationally in dance, building on a rich career as a dancer and choreographer, to teacher and rehearsal director, from artistic director of Zagreb Dance Ensemble to festival director of danceweekfestival.com and curator, member of the Artistic Council of the Rencontre Chorégraphique Saint-Denis and Tanzmesser Focus Canada. She was co-founder of the Moving Academy for Performing Arts in Netherlands, today a MAPA. Having lived and worked on 3 continents and having worked with marginalised communities, the Roma people, immigrants, persons with disabilities, she is passionate about supporting initiatives around inclusive practices in the performing arts and those considerate of migration and cross-cultural initiatives. It's my honour to speak with Mirna today. We are going to talk to Mirna Zagar. I'm very excited about this. We do manage to have lots of little conversations, not so many recently, but we have in the past. They're always so exciting, so inspiring. There are so many things to Mirna. There are so many things to her past. So I have asked Mirna to be a little bit prepared to go deep, maybe not that deep, but at least deep into the past, let's say that, going back in time as well to find out a little bit more about Mirna's past and for Mirna to bring us all the way up to date in her life and the life of the Dance Centre and other things. So Mirna, welcome. I want to say welcome to your podcast, but that's not fair, is it? But part of me, it really feels like that's, partly what I'm doing here is like, okay, Mirna, as the Executive Director of the Dance Centre, thank you for everything you have kind of heralded and spearheaded so far. Our relationship goes back quite a long way, and I'll start with that. I met you first, I think, in 1997, perhaps, 1998, in Vancouver. We'd both kind of arrived in Vancouver around not quite a similar time, but I met you in your role at the Dance Centre when the office was on Beatty Street. And so we've gone through a lot of things with the Dance Centre building and things kind of together, very differently, of course. But I just wanted to acknowledge that and how long you and I have been getting to know each other and been in the dance world and in the Vancouver dance world together. So it is my honour to speak with you in this capacity today. Thank you for agreeing to do this in the middle of all the craziness, and welcome, Mirna Zagar.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks for the warm welcome. It is a bit out of the world, if that is an expression, kind of feeling. because yes, it is the Dance Center's podcast, but it has always been the artist first, and that has always been my prerogative in many respects. And speaking of how long and how far back we go, you were also on the board of the Dance Center. You were in residency with the Dance Center a couple of times. We spearheaded some of your, or supported rather, some of your projects and ideas. And I'm really always very happy and actually quite proud when I reflect back on all the relationships with the many people and how sustaining these relationships have been, but not only for the dance center and that particular artist or group of artists or a company, but for the community as well. And I think I was really, really so excited when the Dance Center started with the podcast. And I thought, yes, we are getting into the new age. Yeah. I mean, we always have all these ideas and they don't seem to materialize. At least I always have that sense of it's not coming about that quickly, is it? And so when it finally arrives, I'm going like, whoopee.
Exactly. Well, I think that's one of the patterns I've noticed in your career, and we'll talk about today. We will go back in time, but there is a pattern of you not just nurturing and mentoring people or running buildings, but running buildings for certain kinds of activities and for sustaining certain kinds of activities, and also giving space to many, many artists and many, many artist voices. So there's this kind of evolution happening and an emerging situation, and then there's the kind of sustaining of things, which I think you are always managing. I've always known you to be that. And having read the bio, I think the listeners will agree with me that that is what's in your whole history. But could we go back then? So much to talk about the present time and all of the things you're doing now. But I'm going to pull us all the way back to the beginning of your relationship with dance. Can we start there?
We will really have to go really, really back in time, because my relationship with dance, I think, starts with my life in Ghana, West Africa, specifically Kumasi, where I lived for, I think 10 years. Those were my actually formative years. And I led a very, I should say, privileged life. But I also was reminded daily by my parents that, I had my chores. But it all served a purpose in a way, looking back. And among other things, I had the pleasure of dabbling in a lot of sports, swimming and tennis first. And then one of the neighbors on campus was a Swedish ballerina who opened her home to campus kids and staged Peter and the Wolf. And I absolutely love that. And for many years, I would say for at least 5 years while she was on campus, and each year we staged only and ever Peter and the Wolf. I moved through many characters and I always looked forward to that. And then in school, because I went to truly Ghanaian school, so not to the American school in the beginning and better part of my time in Ghana, it was games, and these were based in movement and song and rhythm that we engaged before and during recess and after as we waited for the buses. And then, of course, my father really took us to explore the cultures, and we would go to the Durbars and the community festivities. And in the evening, as we were put to bed and quite early, and I would see the sun go down and, the day close through the window, I would also hear the increasing sound of the drumming from the surrounding villages around the campus. And so that put me to bed each night. So in a way that from sound to smells to people to engaging with different cultures from an early age, that's, I think, set the stage to my whole path forward. And the more I reflect on it, the more I see how important it is to be open and to revel in the ability to encounter different cultures, to learn about them, because that informs also who we are, and the differences make us stronger. So that has always been. It took me into a lot of troubling waters as well, many a time.
Yeah.
Not settling for the immediate response of the yes and the no's, because there's always the maybe. And that brings me back to another very important period of my life where I was already a dancer and working with the Dutch scene in particular, where, I learned that, the world of maybe is very strong. And the no can become maybe, and the maybes can become yes if you have strong arguments and can present the case. So these are things that have, I guess, helped what one would call being sustainable, or at least open to different impacts.
It also seems to me that the words like being surrounded by, like every night you would have these sounds. There's something about the integration of those things in your everyday life is something I've become more and more obsessed with. Is under my control. I'm going to have creativity in my life every day, and I'm going to recognize it. I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to give it attention. That's what I've decided is a value for me. And it sounds very much to me like you have that, and it's embedded. It's kind of something that's been with you from very early. So how did you go from Ghana to the Netherlands or to Holland? Was that next? Just in hearing you say, and then when I was a Dutch dancer or something, and I was like, hang on, how did you get there?
Well, after Ghana, we moved back to Croatia, Zagreb, where I sort of gave up on swimming and tennis because that required getting up at 5 a.m. and
and going
joining a professional club. There was no, there were a lot of amateur clubs, but everything was done very professionally. So you had 2 trainings a day, and I just felt this is too much. And then I said I wanted to continue with dance, and I went to audition. And then I was devastated when they said I cannot be a ballerina because I was already in my early teens. My body was, according to them, formed and not in the best proportions, I dare say.
Yeah.
But that I'm welcome to join the contemporary department. And so my father, because he was very much of the type, well, you wanted to do this, now you have to try it and you have to sustain it. And only then can you say you don't want to do it. So there I was in the contemporary department for 4 years. So I jumped, obviously there was some merit to my movement abilities. And I learned to like it. I wouldn't say I loved it. My love for dance actually, and looking at it very differently, I was a bit older than my other peers. So by that time I was finishing also high school, while others were finishing elementary. So that sort of gives an idea of when one starts.
Yeah.
And I enrolled into university, so that gave me different perspectives. And I went to a summer camp because I said, I'm going to fulfill my balletic dream. And I went to a summer camp that was run by Anna Roye, who was famous for her role as Giselle dancing in the UK, and then also was, at the time she had her school in Primosten Summer School, she was also the artistic director of Boston Ballet. Oh. And I would see all these American ballet dancers that would come in residency. And her husband was Oscar Harmos, who was the first role death in The Green Table by Kurt Jooss.
Yes.
And he was this very tall persona, very large persona. And so you had Anna Roye, this gentle ballerina, and this towering persona, and they would forever argue about what is better dance, contemporary or this. And she would say, oh, poor Mirna, she so desperately wants to be the perfect ballerina, but she can't understand yet what it means to work with her body. And she was the one who said, I never had a perfect turnout. I can't and never could raise my leg to my ears. And there I was. Everyone loved. It's all about expression. It's all about the feeling and your presence, and you have to work on it. And then he would say, that's why contemporary dance is so important. So this kind of opened these worlds, different worlds, because everything was very, in your box,
Yes,
sort of box as
absolutely.
concepts at the time.
Yeah.
And very soon I entered a professional dance company in Zagreb, the Zagreb Dance Ensemble. And I danced there for many years. And I think it was in the early 80s that I took over. But already in that interim, I received a couple of scholarships to go to France. I remember in a stint of 3 months and of all things at the Paris Opera. And I was the only contemporary dancer from former Eastern Europe. All of them were soloists. And after 3 weeks, they called me and said, you're welcome to come to training, but we think you would benefit more if you were introduced to contemporary. So they made introductions, and that's how I met Philippe Découfflé, Maggie Moran, and
Lovely. Oh my
that
gosh.
area. So I
Yeah.
had 3 months of loveliness and so wondrous things in Paris. And then the following year, a similar thing took me to Amsterdam Summer University, where I met at the time they had the Dance Institute, they had the Mime Institute, and they had the Theater Institute. And to me, that was, wow, they have these research and archival, and it was all so vibrant and it was so tangible in the moment research, not just looking backwards.
Absolutely,
And
not
also a
museum.
lot of discussions about the role of performing arts in society. That's where I met William Forsythe and where he was amazed that someone else knew about Laban. And I went like, yeah. I mean, and that's where I met also my very dear friend to date is Ida van Heinigen, and with him I developed later a Moving Academy for Performing Arts. That was a network across Europe. So these things stayed with me as I returned to Croatia and as I always yearned for being able to talk to people about these experiences. And I couldn't when I came back to Croatia because others didn't have them, right?
No, it sounds to me
Yeah,
you developed at the same time your ability to converse about these things and discuss these things at a level that was out of most dancers' hands, probably as well.
well, yes, but also through my father's influence, he believed and encouraged me all the time to look at opportunities. He said, opportunity stares in your face all day long,
Yeah.
and it's for your taking and making out of it what you believe is important to you. I remember going to London, and of course, everyone was going to the Pineapple Studio.
Yeah.
I was absolutely rubbish in all those styles, but everyone was going there. So, hey, here I come, London and Pineapple Studios. And, after 3 days, I said there must be something more interesting. And there was, right? So rather than taking in the disappointment, you sort of go like, well, I'm here, let's explore.
Absolutely. And it's a bit like the body saying, okay, how do you work with your body as a dancer? And then it's like,
Exactly.
how as a person do you work with dance in your life, isn't it? It's like an
Exactly.
extension.
Yeah.
I feel like that. And I'm constantly looking at that and seeing opportunities. And then sometimes I felt like, oh, that opportunity isn't one I should take. That's not for me.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you went out and you sought opportunities, you found them, but they were, like you say, they were presented. They were there for you to know that you knew they existed. So it sounds to me like either you looked them up or you were in an environment where you were around people who showed you them? I mean, of course, we're talking at a time when you didn't have the internet. You couldn't find these things that way.
Well, exactly. Like going back to opportunities all around us, right?
Yeah.
And from early age, I was taught I need to earn my living in a way, you know. So, yes, I went to uni, I was dancing in a professional dance company. But if I wanted more, I had to earn it. So I did a lot of babysitting at the time. Among others, I babysat for the French consul, who offered me that, that initial stipend came across his desk. And I said, well, this isn't really for me. I'm not really in classical ballet. He looked at me and said, could you make use of it? I said, well, I probably could. Then it's
Yes.
yours.
Wow. Wonderful.
And
what a lovely conversation to be in. Could you
yeah,
make
and
use
for
of
many
this?
years we stayed in contact because that was the one person that opened the door, recognizing that I was curious, that I was really thinking about what could be happening. So it's a whole world opening. And when I talk to young artists, I say that you need to feed your curiosity. It's not just being curious, you have to feed it. You have to walk through life with eyes open and be prepared for the unexpected too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if these are fun questions. Let's see. If we were to watch a video of you dancing, what would we see?
You would see something that is, how can I say, think of Alvin Nicolai's and
Yeah.
come together with folklore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because when I joined the company Zagreb Dance Ensemble, the choreographer Lela Gluhak Buneta and founder of the company was one. Well, there were three companies at the time, and this particular company was focused on using folklore elements, rhythm in particular,
Mm-hmm.
and abstract forms. So, we'd make our own costumes, or rather, she would start making them, and we had to complete them, and then we'd do that. And
Yeah.
then later on, dance theater, very much dance theater.
Okay.
In the
like the
traditional sense.
Tanztheater, German Expressionism, or you
German
mean?
Expressionism, I'd say Pina Bausch was very, I wouldn't say influential as much as, if you compare it, was very lyrical to what we would be doing, based in mythology and, the Slavic mythology, the big novels, etc.
So you would be abstracting the content of those, or would you be using the narratives of those as your structure? The folklore, would you
I would say a
deconstruct it kind of?
combination because the narrative was important in the sense of what kind of mood character you wanted to put together.
Yeah.
We would pull scenes that we felt were very visceral in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
That gave momentum to improvisation and self expression, but also could be inspiring to composers. We worked with composers, not recorded music mostly, and then how that could build, so it was the jumping point.
Yeah.
And out of that came a whole other story that you could follow or just enjoy what is on the stage.
Yeah. And so have you seen any work, not necessarily recently or just in your, but over the last decade, that has reminded you of that time or has given you a sense of that feeling? Or are you do you feel like they're worlds apart? We had a conversation around one of the Indigenous festivals, I remember, and I think it was Dancers of Dam Lahamid. And the way you were talking about that experience of being at that festival, and there was something, I think, in all of these components coming together that I felt you really kind of, the way you talked to me about it in that moment of just explaining how it resonated with you, it seems to me like there's a little bit of a similarity, but only in terms of a feeling. Like, I'm not saying you were doing the same thing, but I wonder, is it?
Yeah, I would say what stayed with me for all those years since I came to Canada and initially my still very embarrassingly very basic knowledge of the indigenous cultures,
Yeah.
because it is so deep and vast and so complex. I feel I'm just on the very surface of things, came through my encounters with Byron Chief Moon. And then later, the dance center worked with several indigenous artists as artists in residence, and that brought me in contact and connected me to Margaret Grenier, who really she gave a lecture, and this is, I think, that really stayed with me, on the core concepts of how culture, movement, dance, but also space, notion of space. And so I remember the knock, that whole concept of it. And that's where it clicked, because throughout my studies of contemporary dance, and we all know, and I studied art history as well, and we all know how influential, the nations that the white cultures discovered,
Yeah.
in brackets, and then they brought into theories of theater,
Yeah.
contemporary theater, Peter Brook, etc., right?
Yeah.
Because that is the notion of empty space, the notion of how do you acknowledge presence, not just of the performer, but the audience. Even when you don't see it or it's not there, there is that presence around. And it resonated very strongly.
Yeah.
But also, the dances, whether they're new or traditional, and the stories being told are at the same time very specific as much as they are abstract.
Yeah.
And they resonate through different layers of how they evolve in front of us. And that also brought me back to my experiences of theater dance.
Yeah. And do you feel like in the contemporary dance world that is more abstract and more formal per se, in the westernized view of choreographing, if you like, or dancing, is there something in that world that you look to, or that gives you that feeling that I'm partly leading this by something you always say, which is once a dancer, always a dancer. So partly my context is to say, what reminds you of the dancer when you watch dancer? Is it the dancer themselves, or is it a style? Is there a certain style?
I would say it's not a style.
No.
I am very much eclectic, and when I'm in the audience, I'm a member of the audience first.
Yeah.
And so for me, if the performers are present, are they able through their presence to communicate? And then looking at how do they communicate, whatever. I may not understand anything what's happening, and most of the time I give up.
Yeah.
But it is the performer, and then it's also how are the tools of the choreographer, or how do the choreographic tools come together. And when I say choreographic tools, I don't just mean movement, but space, if there are any sets, use of costume, choice of material. You can very quickly see, was there any communication between, a light designer, or were they brought in last minute and just put some color up there? Those layers are really, really important in sustaining also my attention and my belief. And more importantly, the transitions are key. And to me, transitions are what tells me, yes, this artist is putting thought into it. Yeah. They have really tried to craft it, master it. It's not just, this sequence and then quick stop. And this, although of course there are compositions and works that work that way, and then it's very clear. Yeah. But there's not one single element I look for. I rather look at how it all comes together. And you can pretty quickly see also a maturity of not just that one person as the creator, but how curious they are. Are they curious? Are they just, doing it?
Yeah.
And also, what does it say about the society, the context? Is it more closed? Is it open? Are there influences? How do these influences work? Is there dialogue, or is it just performative?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I like that the idea of the intention or the intentionality reads somehow like there's a sense of placement of the artist in relation to all of the things that are being kind of utilized, I suppose, is kind of an interesting, and that goes for a performer
And
too.
I like
Like,
the surprise. And I
yeah,
like the
yeah.
surprise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, please keep the element of surprise, please. So let's move a little bit towards presenting. So you have mentioned a little bit artistic director role. When you was it the Zagreb Dance Ensemble that you were artistic director of for a while, and I think a few other things you've taken on and collaborated with people to run. But where did the presenting first come for you?
Well, when I took over the Zagreb Dance Company, Zagreb Dance Ensemble, actually, for me, it wasn't a conscious and planned decision. It was more around our artistic director at the time left the country. So we went through a year, nearly 2 years of interim directorship. And then there was, okay, we need to stabilize this, like a company decision. What are we going to do? Who's going to be next? And I thought to myself, if I'm going to stay in this career and have a somewhat fulfilling experience, I better have a say in this. So I said, I want to do it.
Wow.
It just came out, and everyone was, what? And I said, yes. And I think we need to invest into new voices. We need to, all of us want to try our hand at choreography. We have 2-3 amazing choreographers outside of, our little company in our midst. They're not purely in contemporary dance, but they're in contemporary theater and contemporary ballet. Let's see what they can bring. And people said, well, okay. So that's how I started, by producing within the company a new generation of dance makers. I invited a theater director who actually went to dance school with me and then was eventually kicked out because he had all these radical ideas. And I invited him to Zagreb. He was at the time living and working. He still is living and working in Slovenia. So I invited him to create a work for us, which was extremely popular. And we kept it on repertoire, and we toured through Austria, Germany, and the region with that very successfully. And then I thought, we were always using a very posh mid-sized theater that had around 400 seats, just under an Italian stage. And I thought, well, we could maybe do 4 different programs a year, 2-3 runs each. What fun is that? We're dancers every single day. And close to where I went to high school, and at the time a friend of mine was managing a club, which was a perfect black box. And I went to talk to him and I said, look, I noticed that your club is always open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What about the other days? And he says, well, there's not much interest. And I said, well, would you give me an opportunity to present or use the club as a way of presenting dance on the Monday, Tuesday, maybe the Wednesday, or the Sunday? And he looked at me and said, okay, I'll give you once a month for a run of 6 months. So that's where we staged this new production with Damir Zlatar Frey from Slovenia. And because there were 4 high schools in the vicinity, and this was a dance theater piece, I thought of, well, the basic premise was based on Krleža, which is a very well-known novelist, and well, even of today, but during communist time especially. And it was somewhat dark. It had Vivaldi, so that fits into the music curriculum of any high school. So I went to talk first to my old teachers, reminding them I used to be a student. And we filled the first evening. Actually, I wrote it sold out. The first two events, I said sold out. We didn't have a single person in the theater. But it was sold out. People came, we sent invitations out. People, well, you didn't respond in time, or, sorry, no more tickets left. And suddenly we built this hype. I think you can only do it once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I did it. And so we filled that with subsequently school groups from that, and then it just rolled, and it went throughout former Yugoslavia. It toured Austria. It went into Germany. The company with this work opened Musanturm in Frankfurt. It was the first performance.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
it was a world football champion. And so there was maybe not even a handful of audiences in there, and they felt terribly bad about it. So they actually paid us out.
Oh my gosh, that's...
I know. But a few curators did come, and the following year we had a proper tour of Germany. Yeah. With that. So, that's what I did for several years, and that's how I got into presenting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just sort of used connections that I had, however soft they were, people who knew people. And, I'd say, well, we're going up. I took the map and I said, we're going up to Frankfurt. Oh, there is Mainz on the road. Who knows someone in Mainz,
Right.
We actually went into theaters that were run by German presenters. So we went to Tilburg, Freiburg, Mainz, Frankfurt, that whole circuit, and just cold calling. And it was quite...
And taking the same work. So this is the touring of a repertoire. It's the repertory system, which allows for that, right? Because you're not constantly creating a new work everywhere you go. And you can also tell people, you can draw on the experiences of the same work. So in that model. So you were dancing and leading. Were you in the ensemble still?
Yes, and I stopped. I was dancing less and less and creating less and less because I got involved in these things. And then we were, I think, celebrating a big anniversary. I think the 15th anniversary of the company. And everyone was saying, so what of all the works, what are we going to remount and celebrate? Are we going back into the big theater?
Right.
And I thought really strong and hard. And I said, well, all the money and all the effort to remount what? And then
absolutely,
would we be able to, like, something 5-10 years later? And anyway, these people may not be available to remount, things like that. So I said, no, it's going to be a regular season. But guess what? We will we'll do a big birthday party. We'll invite our colleagues from across Yugoslavia to come and celebrate with us. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, when you come to a party, everyone brings presents. So we'll ask them to bring a present, and the present will be a present of dance. So some artists and companies responded. And at the time, they said, but where will you find all these stages? And I said, it will be a weekend of dance. But and then I thought very cleverly, on the 25th of May, all of Yugoslavia was celebrating Tito's birthday. And it was called the Youth Day. And there were all these stages being built in that week leading to that weekend on every major city square. And there were all these lights and trusses, like proper stages, right?
Yeah.
So I went to the city council and I proposed this. And they liked the idea, so we circulated the works that were gifted and our own works across these stages. And we also offered free public workshops in whatever dance whoever wanted to lead a workshop offered, and it was either outside on a public square or in a park, and no one had ever seen anything like that. And it was lovely. And then when this all finished, they said, "So when is your next festival happening?" So that's how it all started.
So that's the Zagreb Dance Festival. That's how it all started.
Yeah.
Amazing. And when was that, Mirna?
I think it was in 81, 82.
Yeah. Oh, it's
or
wonderful.
maybe even 83.
I think 2023 was an anniversary. So I think
it's been
a long time, and it's still running. So there you go.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Still running.
Yeah.
And you're still involved. One of the things that has continued is your travel and your connection with Croatia, the exchanges that you bring to Vancouver. So your relationship across Europe with everybody there, that seems, it goes back many, many years, but also the Europe-Canada connection. So I'm wondering if we can kind of talk about travel, how the travel and presenting and the networking and the exchanges kind of started for you, and then a little bit about you bringing that into Vancouver, into Canada. So however you would like to riff on that, I'm happy for you to just connect those dots, really, if you wouldn't mind.
Traveling at that time was very much different than traveling these days, for sure.
Yeah.
It required even more resources, but we were also, I felt, more resourceful.
Right.
We didn't get grants, so you would go strawberry picking and earning some money there to be able to spend some time in the UK. Or you'd go couch surfing with people you met in Holland, France. I think what I take with me for life was the importance of relationship building and staying connected, which was embedded in me through my working with my Dutch colleagues, with whom I've remained very, very closely knit. And when we meet, it just we continue a conversation from God knows when, and experiences, and we continue dreaming what could be happening, right? Although it may never happen, but that sort of fuels imagination.
Yeah.
I have the benefit, I think, also from, yes, the festival, but I also, the festival happens on such small budgets that I had always invested half of what I earned into traveling and feeding and nourishing my soul, my imagination, and through encountering and meeting, and never really thought about, I'm doing this for the purpose of that. It was really about, I just have the urge, the need to exchange thoughts about dance, and people seem to appreciate what I have to offer and say, otherwise they wouldn't keep inviting me in to the mix, for which I'm really, really grateful. And the exchanges, it's like when you have friends, if you are always invited to a party and you're always invited to a dinner at someone's place and you never reciprocate, in time they won't invite you back. It's a relationship, it's a friendship, so it has to have that flow, and it has to be meaningful and has to be genuine. So those are the three things that I keep bringing back into whatever I do, and sustaining over time, and never forgetting who were the people who opened doors to me, never forgetting those who had an influence, be they my teachers or my artistic directors I worked with, or artists I encountered, pieces of brilliance they would impart on me.
Yeah.
Being just grateful for all these moments of connections, and not, nurturing them in many ways.
Yeah, and exchange is a longer term word than a residency, or thinking them just crossing over and people experiencing kind of something of each other. Exchange suggests sustainability, suggests like,
Yeah.
constant
I
work.
mean, this was embedded in the first Moving Academy for Performing Arts initiative. This
Yeah,
initiative still continues under new directorship in Holland under MAPA,
yeah,
mapa.eu, and it was embedded in the exchange of knowledge and skills among peers, and creating a network where people would invite the others from the network to spend time together in different environments. So the idea of the exchange travel through Europe. And also, it's embedded in the notion of the first ITM that I sort of was a little bit part of in Ancona. And none of us had the money. So we created something called Bank Without Money.
hmm,
So artists and the projects toured based on, oh, you have some hotels, okay, maybe the project could go there, and from there it's closer to go somewhere else.
right,
And from that came the notion of the informal European theatre meeting, of which I hosted two, co-hosted, I should say, co-hosted two in Zagreb, well, years apart. One was just before the war in former Yugoslavia, and the other was in the 20s,
wow, wow,
early 20s, yeah.
yeah, and very different
Very
times.
different times and connections. The ability to be involved with the European Dance Development Network also gives me different perspectives and abilities to contextualize not only what I am doing, but what the Dance Center could be doing or is
Yeah,
doing within
yeah,
more global context, being part of the Big Pulse network as well, exchanges that the visiting artist program where big festivals are adopting artists to host artists just to see works.
hmm,
So that notion that artists should be able to not just enter into a residency which automatically has a transactional almost expected outcome of a
yeah,
performance of some sort somewhere, but coming into a place that is an exchange of experience, thoughts, ideas without any expected outcome. So, with friend, colleague, and peer in New Zealand, Adam Hayward, that many of the Vancouver people are also now have gotten to know, as he was a curator for one of our Dance in Vancouver
yeah,
events, developing what is called space to fail. Of
yeah,
course, no one is failing here, but you are allowed to do some outlandish undertakings without, I wouldn't say without responsibility or accountability, because artists are very accountable and responsible in what they're doing,
yeah.
but in the sense of, yeah, you might have this cool idea, but maybe now's not the moment. Maybe there never will be the moment, but why not?
Yeah, and
You
this is back to your the point about curiosity. It's
know?
like it's giving you time to act on your curiosity, which we
Yeah,
don't always get in this
yeah.
climate, definitely. Yeah, so what drew you to Canada?
Well, something very practical, to be
Yeah,
honest. Following the war in Croatia, my husband left for Canada,
yeah.
and 2 years later, 3 years, that's what it took to get new visas for us, my son and
Hmm.
I. We visited, my son stayed on with his father, and I had stuff to do in Europe, so I kind of traveled
Yeah,
back and forth. While I was in Vancouver, I explored dance. It was pretty difficult to find where it was happening.
yeah.
I kind of felt upset at my husband because he would send me all these glossy brochures that I thought, wow, things are really hopping. They've got money for this,
Yeah.
right? And then I came and then I kind of, where are these
Where
spaces
is
and
it?
places?
Yeah.
Doors were pretty shut. Not many people were willing to engage. So I found it very hard. I did all sorts of other jobs, from cleaning houses to selling carpet cleaning to being a telemarketer. So I learned the hard way of an immigrant, what it means being an immigrant. And I also took that to heart when I did join the dance center, that, a center for dance must be open to immigrant communities as well as any other art organization or any other civic entity, let alone the other economies.
So how did in some ways it's quite amazing that you were doing all of those things in Canada and then the job came up to be, was it that simple? Was it like one of these moments where you say, like, with the opportunities, if you look around, you'll see the opportunities right there in front of you? Like, it
You
feels,
also have to create opportunities,
yeah,
right?
which you've
Among what
obviously,
is happening.
yes, yeah,
Obviously, I try to find ways to see performances. It was really hard because I didn't have the money.
no,
I couldn't volunteer because reputable companies that are still around and individuals would tell me, well, you don't have a Canadian experience, so we can't take you on as a volunteer. And I would go like, well, how would I get the Canadian experience if I can't even volunteer? How difficult is it to, be an usher? Or no
yeah,
one. People were really, really close. I would sit. I made a point, and I told my husband, I will stay here for a total of 4 5 years tops, and then we're going back, because if I can't work in dance, I'm not interested in staying here.
yeah,
Because not because it's not nice, but it's reminds me every day that I'm not a valuable contributing person of society, and yet there is no opportunity to show that I can contribute. I can't give, I have something to contribute. I would come. I found out about the dance center on Beatty Street. I would go there. On one of these occasions, I met Catherine LaBelle,
mm-hmm.
who said, after 2 3 times seeing me sitting in the waiting room, she said, "Oh, I see you here. What are you doing?" And so we first became friends. Then I said, well, I could help you organize your files in the office. I could help you with a grant. Then I produced her work for JCC, and that's how I met Ted Robinson, etc.
Oh, great.
Then I was engaged at the time as a member of the Artistic Council of Rencontre Chorégraphique de Saint-Denis,
yeah.
which was this humongous dance competition worldwide.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and I'd see videos from Montreal, and I was already in Vancouver, and I said, there's a scene in Vancouver as well. Maybe you could. So I gave them a couple of addresses, and on the following year we got a few, and Kinesis dance came and caught people's attention, mine as well. So when I came to Vancouver, I called Paras, and of course, Paras being Paras, very inviting and welcoming. Of course, you can come to see my rehearsal. Of course, and I have a performance, and here are tickets. And that was the first time anyone offered me tickets in 3 years.
Wow.
And I was like, yay, I'm getting somewhere. So they were the ones that talked to some people at the board level, and Catherine LaBelle, I think she was on the board of VIDA, who then was providing these grant writing services. So she talked also to some board members, and they proposed me to get some grant, like ghost grant writer at the dance center, because I had gotten all of her grants. People were amazed that we filled up the JCC you
Right.
know, with her production. And it was a different space for dance. And I said,
Yeah.
why do you want to go to places where they have dance? Why not use the JCC? And she'd go like, but it's a big theater. I said, so the bigger the better.
The bigger the better.
You know,
More
and we
people
were
can see
able
it.
to fill it, right? So that's where I did some grant writing. So that's my connection to the dance center. And then I met on my travels, I met Denis Bergeron, who then I learned he was hired as the executive director, and he told me, oh, you know, they're finally going to build this building, and you know, kind of kept me in the loop. And then on one of my short stays in Vancouver, I was introduced. Well, in between there was the first dance in Vancouver that I had pitched initially to the dance center, and they had accepted it in principle. And I was really honored and a bit shocked when Grant Stratin, opening the event, acknowledged me.
Great.
And in time, we became very close friends. I really looked up to him in guidance and all of that. And then I was called by not one, but two, three board members. Would I apply for the job?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, would I not? And I did, and then I left for Europe. And when I was in Europe, I received a phone call that would I come back for an interview. And I said, well, maybe we can have the interview by phone, or unless you buy me a ticket, because I won't be returning for another 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we did have the interview by phone, and miraculously they said they would like to hire me. But I said, I've got these projects to wrap up. And so the interim director was appointed, and that was Linda Blankstein. And that's how she and I got connected.
Great.
And the rest is history. I came, and my next day on the job, I was told there will be no dance center.
Yeah. There will be. You got the job for a place that was no longer,
because the board at the time, what happened was the city recanted or retrieved the land they had initially donated for the dance center to be built.
Oh.
And that was the news when I arrived, and my first day on the job was, well, welcome, but we have news for you. Your job no longer will be part of this development because we just lost the land.
So did you still have a job? I mean, did
Oh,
you
yeah,
have to?
yeah.
I mean, obviously you do, and you have, but in that moment, in that conversation, was it about the job? Oh, it was about what you would do in the job. Yeah,
Well,
is
the
that the
job
difference?
was like, we don't have the land, but, you can administer the grants and,
And the membership and
and there
all of
weren't
this.
very many programs or anything
No.
at the time. And so for me it was like, I don't know, the whole world came apart. I moved the whole
You moved.
continent. I had all these hopes, and suddenly, and that's where my husband just said, since when was a no to you?
Yeah, well, I was just
And
going to say exactly the same thing. Obviously, you didn't take that as a no. Or you
no,
took that on board and turned the no around. To the beginning of our conversation around a no can turn into a maybe, and a maybe can often turn into a yes. We know
exactly.
it can also turn into a no, but
Yeah,
you're not gonna stop fighting.
yeah.
And when we look back on it now, it's quite remarkable, Mirna, like how maybe some of the things are the same, but your tenacity and the networking and the belief that obviously other people had, and we know obviously Linda Blankstein and people, when you get together, you can make such a massive change, such a significant change. The Vancouver dance scene is it's on the map. It is on the map of a global scene in some ways. So much has happened that you have been instrumental in and integral in its evolution and been involved in it this whole time. What do you think happened? Like when you got the land, the Scotiabank land, which we're now in a very different position. So you didn't have the land, and then suddenly, obviously, you did have the land, because for 25 years, there was the land. Did you do that? Did you and
Well,
Linda do that? Did you and the board and Linda do that?
this is what I went home. I thought, quick and fast on my legs. I
Yeah.
came back. There was the Dance Foundation board and there was the Dance Center board. And so I asked for the two boards to meet with the two boards. And I just said it very simply, I'm new to this.
Yeah.
I see the glass is half full. I can appreciate that after so many years, because it has been since 1976
Wow.
that this dream of building a home for dance existed, and some players were still around that table. And I can appreciate that you are really tired, and this is disappointing news. But what would it take? And they said, well, we have to find land, and it can't be land that is city owned. And I said, well, would they give money instead of the land? So that was one question that needed response. I was lucky enough that two key funders at the time, Anne Valois, who was head of the dance department at Canada Council for the Arts, and Gillian Wood at BC Arts Council, they both knew of my accomplishments in Europe, my standing internationally, and they knew that they sort of believed that I had something to offer, different and new, certainly a different experience, and they were supportive. So the city was questioning why would the dance center, this small organization, deserve a building like this. So thanks to the Anne Valois specifically and to Julian Wood, there were conversations on 3 levels where they said they would continue, and together we brought Heritage in, Linda Johnston at the time, who actually was, I learned over time, she was the one that actually spearheaded the notion, if you guys came together and formed an organization, which was then the Dance Center, you could apply for an infrastructure grant, which would mean you could do a feasibility study and eventually apply for grants to build a building, right? So that's how it all sort of evolved way back when. And so all these entities came together, and there was concern that after so many years, nothing was really done. I mean, there was the feasibility study, there was this, there was that. And they decided that, okay, we waited for all these years. We will give you 6 months to find land. And this is where the foundation, and in particular Mo Faris, really worked his magic, and his connectivity as one of the key developers in Vancouver, and a client who was a big client, I imagine, of Scotiabank.
Yes.
And there was this empty space. We, of course, looked at many other venues and spaces, but negotiations quickly would fall through. And then there was this empty bank that was the location for the filming of the X-Files.
Oh, yeah.
And there was this article in the papers, and I think even on TV, that X-Files is moving down south, and talking about how the filming took place in this empty building. And I think what worked in the favor of the bank providing this generous donation was also the fact that at the time banks were closing their branches, and there was a big negative pushback from citizens, like, where are we going to do our banking? So this was a good story and a good outcome for them. So that's how it came together, very last minute, and very quickly.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, there are so many stories, and there's so many places that we can find out about the actual building, the design of it, all of those things. But I'm just talking with you about these. These are the things that are really hard to write down in reports.
Yeah.
Our conversation now is all the back stuff. But you must have some quite fond and funny memories as well of those times. Maybe when you were first in the job, what was it like to stand in front of both the board members of both of those organizations, like the Dance Foundation and the VDC board, and be this new person and suddenly be the person who was selling carpet cleaners, and cleaning people's houses, to being the voice in the room that says, hey, let's make this thing happen. Like, do you have fond memories of those times as well? I mean, you must.
My memories are ones of tireless hours late into the night reading on real estate and going into the public library on weekends and understanding what is it to operate buildings and things like that, because one of the strangest experiences really was when the city confirmed that they are still on board and that they would give $1 million to the development of the home in lieu of the land that we had lost, but that it came with a condition, and they wanted us to undertake a feasibility study, to which I responded, but there was a feasibility study, and the result of that feasibility study is in the architectural drawings,
Yes,
in
right.
as articulated needs and all of that. I don't quite understand. So they said, well, you have to create an operating plan. And I thought there was one, and realizing, oh my God, there isn't one. So I called my dad, who's an architect, and he was also in construction and all of that. I said, well, how do I go about this? And he said, well, how do you run your house? You have to pay utilities, you have to pay this, you have to pay that. I said, yeah, but how will I know?
How much?
And he says it's very simple. You can do it, because I said we don't have these softwares, like we didn't have computers. We didn't, like, how do you?
Wild to think.
It
Didn't
was
have
really
computers.
wild, and so I did it very manually. I spoke to the architects as well. And they said, well, what we could do is we can't assess how much energy you'll be using and all of that, because that depends on how you're going to use the building, blah, blah, blah. But you won't go wrong. They all said, you won't go wrong if you plan the expenses as if you're going to use it 100% of the time, because you won't.
Yeah, right, yes.
So, it sort of started there, and then manually calculating, okay, how many watts of this and what is the cost of that, and looking at how do other buildings come up with this and that and the other, getting involved in the strata council as well.
So far away from presenting dance.
Exactly.
Right? So far away.
But in a way it was, a dance in itself, because you meet all these other people who are surprised at the type of questions and who's this person asking these questions.
Yeah, but behind the whole thing, the whole time, is this still the same vision? So all of these steps.
It's the same vision, yeah.
Yeah, that you're having to kind of put in place to make sure that this thing works, all for dancing to exist in a more prominent way, for more people to access.
Yeah, but you see, this is in the background also what I try to impress on emergent artists in particular, artists as well, in general, when I work with them on career plans and mapping careers and this and that and the other, where they all are deeply frustrated with having to deal with administration and audience development. And I said, the life and career of an artist comprises of three things: artistic practice, administration, because it's a business. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand it, and if you don't go about it as a business, no one else will on your behalf. And third is audiences, because you need to be responsible for your work and you need to do your work so that you engage with an audience and develop an audience for your work. So it's intertwined. So don't look at these other two segments, or at least the administrative part, as the biggest enemy. Look at it as something that is inherent to your practice, that supports and props up your practice, and you do it consistently. So that's how, when I look back, and the notion of, I'll just be floating in the studio and practicing daily and vigilantly, and someone else will do all that. It's not how it works. 90% of the work is in administration, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I like to think of it now as articulation and communication. So they're the parts of the artistic practice, and that while I'm working on those in the studio and I'm back in there doing that, I'm also doing that in my administration. I'm also doing that in my communication with other people.
Exactly.
So articulation and communication, they're
translating
all the same
these
thing.
experiences to these other modules of a different type of communication.
Yeah. And working in universities, I'm also surrounded by people on a weekly basis who don't understand what dance in a university is, and or are psychologists or in other departments where you would think they would have an openness to it, but they still don't know. They've never seen dance, or they've seen something that shocked them that they wanted to talk to me about. Why would it be created to shock me? What would be the point? I'm having to have conversations. I just really enjoy being able to talk about it in all of these different ways.
But this
I think
is
it's
the
very
role
exciting.
of an artist, right? To open
Yes.
doors and to widen those perspectives, because no one else will. And who better to speak about the art form and the dance than the artist in the moment?
Yeah, and there's no better way, I think, to then take that back into the studio and be like, oh, so this is where I want this to be clear, and this is where I can noodle around. But the noodle around has intention. The noodle around is the thought, is the creativity, there's something in there that is that is purposeful. Yeah. Okay, this is amazing. So I have a couple of things before we focus on our part 2, and I just want to throw this in. What is something people would be surprised to know about you? I already feel you've already revealed some things that are a little bit of a surprise, but what is something you think that our listeners would be surprised to know about you? Is it for you to say? I mean, it's the age-old question, right? We create our work and we put it out there for other people to respond to and interpret how they will, and for it to resonate. But is there something you'd like to share on that front?
Well, I think people who are not in dance and are outside of dance always are curious to learn that I make a living from dance in different ways, and that there are different ways of a life of a dancer or a dance artist, and you never stop being that, right? I think people are surprised that I actually enjoy doing some very ordinary things, like I love dabbling in my garden. I love watching cooking shows and reading recipes. I love cooking for big crowds of people. I don't like cooking for myself. Things I don't really know. Right now my obsession are my grandkids, and I marvel at how these young souls are maturing daily, and their observations of life around them. And I'm taking on a different perspective of the role arts has to play in the shaping of young minds and people in general. The role of art in society, I think, is ever more important, has its place in all sorts of sectors, not just arts and culture, not just education, not just health and social services, but in research of all types. And I look at it from the perspective of the playfulness of, my 6-year-old grandkids. And their reactions when we go and see we've just started seeing shows and things, and how they react to that. And the big worry is that if we lose that perspective, what is of the future? What kind of future are we building for this? Not even next generation, but the generations after. And that is a huge concern of mine. I'm not an activist, but I think through daily actions, in thinking through with the role of dance and how it is imperative that artists start doing their civic duty by voting and not being cynical and saying, I'm not going to vote because there's no one to vote for. You vote for the options you have, or you create another option. But staying on the fence and commenting is not the way. So, it's just, what can I do in the little time I still have in the world? And with the means that I do have, be it now working at the dance center or whatever else will be next to come, that I am doing it in a meaningful way, in a mindful way, and what is it that I'm leaving behind.
Yeah, amazing. Mirna, thank you so much. We will move on in our part 2 to the Dance Centre's present wonderful situation and get behind that a little bit, because also that's complex, and also carry on this conversation a little bit where you've just taken it into its future. But we will end our part 1 right here with Mirna Zagar. Thank you so much, Mirna.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Centre, Twitter at Dance Centre, and Instagram at The Dance Centre BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecentre.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Centre podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.